we still have people getting on, but I did want to welcome everyone to the May advocacy meeting, otherwise known as the Alan and Jim Show. So I'll just kind of let them jump in and get started.
Thanks, Dina. It's great to be here, and kind of a strange time. You know, when we set this training up, we thought we'd be talking about everything that happened during session, that it was basically everything was over, but it didn't play out that way. Session didn't close at the time they normally did. There's lots of reasons why. So this has become a different training, but when trying to come up with an outline for it, I realized so much happened during the part of the session that did not include the budget that is worth moving forward with this. And we'll probably have a part 2 where we talk about what we call the rest of the story, for those of you that remember that entertainer. So today we're going to be talking about a lot of things. We're very fortunate. You know, we were going to get some experts on here that from the legislature, but then when I thought about it, the best expert you can have when talking about disabilities is Jim DeBogren. There's no question that we could get anyone from the legislature, anyone from the state, but there's no one that understands what's going on the face and behind the mask on what's happening with disability. So Jim, thank you for joining us today. I appreciate you, and everyone knows you because you chair the Family Cafe. You've been the agency head before. You have immense credibility with media outlets, legislators, and everyone else. So we appreciate you being here, and you can interrupt me and correct me or jump in and add things to anything we talk about today.
All right. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
The other person we're having is an extraordinary lobbyist named John Reese. He's with Smith, Bryan, and Myers, one of the best lobby firms in the state, no question, always rated top. But the key thing about him is they can get me, my board president, whatever, into the room with the person that needs to hear what we have to say whenever we want. And John's been great behind the scenes. He might not even be on now because I know he's over there advocating, but just wanted to mention John Reese might jump in from time to time too. Are you on, John?
I haven't seen him.
Okay. Just so you know,
he's on.
Okay, good, John. Welcome, John. We're going to also put this on YouTube afterwards so people can watch it later. Good to see you, John. You're looking great. You know, our objectives today is to tell you what's happened at this point in session. It's going to explain why session was extended, what remains unresolved, in an overview of what's going to happen from here. But also, because we have so many advocates on, we're going to be talking about advocacy is not over. There's still things going on. That means we're still advocates. And there are things we can do. And there'll be little points during this presentation. We'll talk about what you can do as an advocate to ensure we get what we need. From bills to laws, you know, it's often confusing for lay people, but let me tell you where we are right today. There were 1,952 bills filed. That means legislators filed documents that they wanted the law changed 1,952 times. Only 255 bills passed, where that means the House and Senate had identical bills. That means only 13% of the laws that people wanted passed. And let me tell you, we should be very happy because those are substantive laws, and we got a lot of that. And I'm going to talk about that in a minute. That's 13% of the bills. If you go back 25 years, that's almost one of the fewest percentage of bills passed, but also one of the fewest number of bills passed. And so I think that's important to note that our successes are really big successes when it comes to substantive law. And I wanted to make sure I talked about one bill in particular. But before I do that, Jim, tell us, why are we done with substantive laws and only talking about budget now? Why is there a big divide right there? Can you give some insight into that?
Sure. The legislature is required every year. In fact, it's the only thing they're really required to do per the Constitution, and that's to pass a state budget. And they did not do that by the time the session was supposed to be over with, which would have been last Friday, May the 2nd, I believe. Yep. And so what they did typically, and I think everybody involved in the process just assumed that they would shut the session down, meaning every pending bill automatically died. They would have had to come back in a special session. They would have had to have refiled their appropriations bills and gone through the motions of passing them off the floor and then going into a conference committee and negotiating the differences. However, they decided instead to extend the session. And what they did is they extended the session on a joint resolution that provided that the Appropriations Act and several related bills. So there's what is called an implementing bill, which makes temporary one-year changes to state law in order to conform state law to budget decisions. And then there are a series of what are called conforming bills, which are designated by the legislature as necessary to implement recurring items that are needed to facilitate the budget. So only those bills remain alive. But from a practical standpoint, the advantage of that approach is that they don't have to start over. They don't have to go through. Every bill has to be read and before each chamber 3 times before it can be put on final passage. They're not going to have to do that. They will start with the bills that are already there, the budget bills. They've already got the substantive bills that they're going to bring in, and then they'll go to conference. Now, the hang-up had to do with just the most fundamental starting point of how much money there was to spend. Florida, like every other state I'm aware of, has a balanced budget requirement in the state constitution. In other words, they cannot spend money that is not projected to be available through official state revenues. Both chambers had provisions that related to state tax policy, i.e. tax reductions that would change the amount of money that each side had to spend. And so the hangup was they could not come to terms with what that tax package was going to look like, what the bottom line was going to look like. So until they knew how much they had to spend, they couldn't get around to the process of actually issuing what are called budget allocations to each of the various areas of the budget. And these are education, health and human services, criminal justice, transportation, economic development, the judiciary, and so on. So these large buckets, and then set their subcommittees off to negotiate differences within each silo. Now, my understanding as of today, they've agreed at least on a basic framework. They've agreed on a bottom line. My understanding is they've not yet agreed on the actual allocations to each of the various substantive areas of the budget. And John Reese may have more updated information. So, John, if anything I'm saying is not accurate, you let me know. Or if you've heard anything more up to date, let me know.
And John, give your perspective, because it's almost like the substantive laws, which me and you've been fighting, all of us have been fighting. You know, I see Stephanie there. She's been in the ring too. We've been fighting all session, committee meetings and all. And that part is kind of philosophically over, substantive law. Now we're on the budget part. And Jim just mentioned the idea that there's a big pot of money, but they haven't whittled it down now. Where do you see we in this middle of the road place with regard to advocacy?
Yeah, no, good question, Alan. And sorry, I was just a moment or two late there joining the call. So Jim hit the nail on the head in terms of budget procedure and timing and where we're at. Some of the indications I've gotten preliminarily out of the Senate tonight or last night and this morning is that there's a very aggressive timeline and plan to come back as early as Monday and begin budget conference. That means we would likely see conferees announced. Again, that's assuming, as Jim pointed out, there's agreement on allocations. Given that the larger framework is in place, they still need to make individual allocation determinations. And so once those are done, I think they very aggressively want to come in next week. I've heard that they want to finish by the end of next week. I think that's very ambitious, and we won't get into building the watch as it relates to the budget conference, but it's a very ambitious timeline. But I think as of today, talking to some of our champions, that's the hope and desire. And so, Alan, I think to your question, I don't want to say we're in a holding pattern. We're actually in a very delicate time, a very important time, because if one is to believe that next week is the time in which they conference, that means staff is working overtime this week to put them in a posture to be successful, to make offers, come to agreement on some of those differences. So as our advocates are out there talking to staff, or more importantly, their elected officials in the House and Senate, this is absolutely the right time to make some of those requests. And Alan, I'll stop there because I know there's a transition from some of our policy goals like Medicaid unwind that we believe will reemerge during the budget process, but I don't want to get ahead of the larger discussion and your agenda.
Thanks, John. I appreciate that. And
Hi, Alan.
I think the way we're going to do this is I'm going to talk about because the substantive issues have passed, but they're not done, because you still have the opportunity for them to be sent to the governor, a veto, and possibly an override veto. And I'm going to talk about that as we talk about the bills. But then we have the budget part, which leaves a lot in play that some people may think some issues are dead, but I don't think they're dead. And I think we're going to talk about some of those. But let me talk about a couple of the bills that passed. And this is why we got to be extremely proud of the different groups that have been advocating throughout session. And we have made an impact. The families through We the People, For the People, By the People, but not a gun group. I like to add that to make sure that they understand that it's about people with disabilities. But them and many other groups. The Brevard has a group. The Arc of Florida is out there. FARF's out there. I'm going to go through the bills that we ended up with that passed. I won't cover them all, but I'm going to cover some of them. And then I'm going to cover the ones that didn't pass. The first one I think is so important that no one knows about, under the radar screen, but we were over there fighting for it. John set up so many meetings on this, was the Administrative Procedure Act bill that Senator Grahl filed, Senate Bill 108. And a lot of you may not understand all the nuances for rule development and rule passing. Most of you understand all the red tape, why things can't get done, but they don't understand the genesis of it, and it's through rulemaking. And although it wasn't talked about a lot, except in a committee called the Joint Administrative Procedure Act Committee, which is one of the only committees that has both senators and representatives on it, and rotating chairs that leader from both. And I think Grahl and Offendorf were the two leads on that. Very interesting committees. But let me tell you how it ended, because this is great news. The first thing is they require agencies. Wasn't here before. This is all new stuff. Agencies have to notice rule development within 30 days, and they have to propose the rule within 180 days. We all saw the nightmare when a law passed 2 years ago with regard to licensing of adult day trainings. And I think they proposed the rule like a day before it became where it started. And in the statute, it said that if you didn't get your license, you couldn't bill. So it turned into, luckily APD was flexible and we resolved that. But this fixed that issue, that when a law passes I know when we had having a form online and stuff like that, and we kept waiting. Well, this now forces the agency to act timely so we can engage, because rulemaking is really about the public being engaged and them taking feedback from families, from providers, from self-advocates. They can make a good rule. The second part, and so that part passed. The other thing, and I know a lot of you don't look at rules when they come out, but I look at everyone. Jim looks at everyone. A lot of you look at everyone, but it restricts the incorporation by reference and requires agency to underline new text and strike through deleted text when updating their incorporated documents. Persons with disabilities, the rules we follow is all an incorporated document. That's how they do work. But now we can see what's changing. We miss a lot of things because it's hard to tell when they do a rule what they changed and what they didn't change when you just see the end result and you read it. So this is going to be real helpful for advocates. But I think most important, it's going to help Agency with Persons with Disabilities and Agency for Healthcare Administration and Department of Children and Families, because they can get good feedback. If people don't see the differences and want to comment on them, it's hard to give these agencies good feedback. We need to start looking at this as a partnership with the agencies, and I think this gives us the opportunity to do that. Another thing that's really big is it broadens the scope of agency workshops to include gathering statement of estimated regulatory cost, and expands who may challenge a proposed rule. I'll give you two quick examples, and you might want to comment on it, Jim. Is when iConnect was going on, and we could show that Jim, I think, was starting the process, could show that it cost so much money that there were alternatives. He never got due process or a fair shake to educate the agency, and also by, in fact, being able to notify the legislature so they would have to validate what they did. Another one, and I'll have you comment on that, Jim, was the settings rule. If the ARC of Florida put in a necessary regulatory cost, which we believe triggered them to look at other ways to do the settings rule. Because remember, when it came to the settings rule, we wanted 2 words added, and it was the same 2 words the federal law had, but we couldn't get it added because they wouldn't look at the cost associated with the rule. So any comments regarding that, Jim? Because I know that that was a big issue that you wanted to be able to educate the agency and the legislature.
Yeah, let me just so everybody understands, there are provisions in the law already that required that if a bill would cost small businesses in excess, I believe it was of $250,000 per year, or over $1 million over a 5-year period, then the agency was required to file, along with the bill, a statement of estimated regulatory cost. Florida has the most, I guess, restrictive Administrative Procedures Act probably in the country. And that was done on purpose because they did not want unelected people in an agency imposing what amounted to taxes on citizens, or imposing cost of living here or doing business here. What the agency, in this instance, they decided that since signing a contract to provide Medicaid services was optional on the part of a provider, then there were no costs associated with the rule, even though I had documented just for iConnect, just using the agency's own estimates of the time that providers would spend inputting data. I documented a cost of it exceeded $10 million. It's very significant. So the agency, and this was just a common tactic. I think they did the same thing with the settings rule. They've done the same thing with one other rule, and that is the agency, because like, well, hey, you don't have to do business in Florida, or you don't have to do this business in Florida. Therefore, this does not cost you any money. And that is probably not consistent with the intent of the law. And I do believe this bill gets at this. And then, Alan, like you said, just the ability for others to claim affected status and be able to challenge the rules is going to be pretty big as well.
Yeah, and I'll say this, there's another part of this that requires the agency, even if they don't want to use a lower cost alternative, but to disclose it to the Joint Administrative Procedure Committee before adoption. So now you got the legislature looking at what's happening, and I think that's big. Remember, if these issues were able to be brought up, these alternatives, we would never have the fiasco we did this year with iConnect. It would never have happened. I'm a true believer of that. And we would have never had hundreds and hundreds of people losing their jobs through the settings rule if we were able, if the legislature knew about it. Because I remember one time I testified in a committee and everyone agreed with me, but you know, they moved forward and it really hurt those that are have the most complex disabilities from being able to work, I believe. So, and the other thing they're doing is they're having the agency review every rule in the next 5 years. So APD will be looking at 20% of their rules. ACA will be looking at 20% of their rules across the board, because they've realized we've been ruled to death. Red tape everywhere. It's bleeding over everybody. It's terrible. And that gives us an opportunity. The good news is APD's kind of opened up. They're kind of working with us, ACA, I think, now on the rules. I think we're going to see major changes. I think the biggest benefit to this bill is to the executive branch, to be honest. And I think they'll be rewarded. I do not think there'll be a veto, but because I think it benefits them the most. But if there is, we're going to try to rally people to do something about that, because it's a great bill, I think. Hats off to the House and Senate for going into a chapter that rarely gets looked at, but this is really good. So that's that bill. Another bill I wanted to mention quickly was House Bill 447, the Disability History and Awareness Instruction. This one passed as a shock to me, with all the language about we don't want to do diversity, equity, all this stuff. And out comes this. And I think it's something we need to consider, that when they talk about this diversity and all this stuff, they're not talking about disabilities. I truly believe that they're not looking at that. And I'm always trying to careful to be lumped in with the argument, whether I believe it or not, with the other issues. Our issues different in the legislature, very conservative legislature, and it was Representative Salzman that led the charge on this, say kindergarten through 3rd grade have to be included in conversations of bullying and teaching about physical disabilities, that autism spectrum disorder instructions for grades 4 through 6, hearing impairment for 7 through 9, and learning and intellectual disabilities for kids that are in grade 10 through 12. This is a huge victory on educating people as their children, so when they grow up, they realize the value of people with developmental and intellectual disabilities adds so much to our communities, and we need to do everything to help that. And I think the legislature gets a gold star for this, unanimous votes in both houses. So I wanted to mention that. Another one that was pretty big that is House Bill 711 from Barrero. Representative Barrero, about the spectrum alert. Locating missing children with autism spectrum disorder and enhancing the law enforcement responses is needed. We have a lot of challenges. Florida has the most water anywhere you can imagine. You know, there's so many retention ponds, there's so many lakes. It's just crazy. This is a long time coming, very important. And they're going to implement the spectrum alert by July 1, 2026, because They got to develop the curriculum with the state agencies, law enforcement, and we'll give input, of course, and work it within the existing alert structures, because there are alert structures. And I like the fact they put $190,000 to support the new alert system. Big victory for all of us, and very grateful the legislature passed that. The next one I want to mention is House Bill 1567. Representative Tuck, about insulin administration by direct support professionals. And, we talk about being grassroots, but nothing can be more grassroots than Anthony Mancuso coming up here to advocate for his son, Adam, to be able to not have to go to a nursing home, because he wants direct support professionals to be able to do a little insulin thing. In fact, he did an example of it. He showed it, and great advocacy. And I love the fact that Senator Harrell said, I got a 10-year-old that does that on his own. Why are we stopping this? And there's like probably 150 people plus in institutions right now that could probably come out and live in group homes. And two things they did besides allowing that to happen, and I think this is bigger than we know, is they, for the first time, defined direct support professional. It is so difficult to recruit throughout our provider community and families that are doing CDC Plus when they don't have a definition or a name for this individual that's going to be helping people be independent that have disabilities, the developmental disabilities. This is going to be good because we can all talk the same language. People in high school can learn about these jobs, and we'll start getting people that came here because they learned about it and gravitated to it, instead of us accidentally finding people or having people that have a relative that happens to have a disability. That's how they get there. So I think it's going to expand our recruitment. We're going to get people that care about what we do. But the other thing they did in here is provide civil immunity for group homes and direct support professionals and relatives who administer insulin in compliance with this. So there's going to be training involved. I think this is a great bill, and very proud of Anthony for spending all his time to make it happen in our Arc of Indian River that this originated out of. So that was really good. The next one is just amazing. You all might not know this passed. It was referred to as the free kill bill. House Bill 6017 by Trabulsi. The technical name is Recovery of Damages for Medical Negligence Resulting in Death, also known as the free kill bill. Why is it called that? Well, if a doctor, hospital, or nursing home makes a fatal mistake and the victim is over 25 with no minor children, their family has no legal recourse. That is likely to be a lot of people we advocate for with disabilities. And I love the name Free Kill Bill. I think that helped kill all the arguments against it. It's been haunting the legislature for years, this bill, and it's finally been fixed. The last bill, and the most important bill I want to talk about, is from Kincart Johnson, the APD bill, House Bill 1103. This is a huge bill. It's about transparency. It's about accountability. Really love this bill, and kudos to Stephanie and her team of advocates that I consider myself part of, because I go to their meetings to support them, the We the People group. But it gives people with disabilities more choices. And they were the ones that really brought up the issue. You have this managed care company in the Hillsborough and Miami part that we don't have enough data for to be able to really look at how it's doing. You're going statewide. We just had this scenario where ACA, without any legislative direction, changed the rules for how you get Medicaid, that you're forced into a managed care and you have to opt out of it, even though you can't get anyone on the phone or get through the email. But that was the rules that they fought for, and everyone agreed. I mean, even the managed care company involved, they wanted families to have the choice to be able to opt in, and you can't be forced to do the managed care. You still have the iBudget. But the other thing about the expansion, and I've talked to people around the state. There's a lot of people on the wait list and they don't have enough people in the pilot. Let's get people in there so we can manage, so we can see it, but also gets people services that otherwise wouldn't get services. We've seen the issues with regard to the wait list and the money being poured into it, yet the waiver doesn't grow. The people are on it, there's not more people on it. So it's kind of stunning. And I think this is going to get, and I think that was the frustration why they're even looking at managed care, is because they want to get people off the wait list. And the good news about this, that even if you do go on managed care to see how it works, you always have the option to go back to fee for service through the iBudget waiver. And they're also gonna, but that's one part of it. The other part, it helps people get service faster. It expands the pilot program, I said, but it offers a real human support. It creates a call center and with partners and community organizations, so families can get helpful information, not to just be left figuring it out on their own. It makes funding fairer. This is probably the biggest part that really we really haven't discussed much, but it redoes the complicated formula. And I know a lot of families have been frustrated because the formula doesn't match their needs. This is going to be big. There's going to be a study on it, and that's going to be important. I know we'll all be waiting for the study to learn. Another thing is it demands more transparency. All this publishing waitlist and funding that always used to be there back when Jim was running things, it's disappeared from the website. And recently, one chapter of ours had to spend hundreds of dollars to get information that should be public about how many people on the wait list in our county. That should not be an issue. And that's going to be really big that that's available to us, because a lot of you guys, a lot of groups apply for grants, and you need that information to get the grants because they need to see the numbers to be able to give the grants. And lastly, it gives families a voice. The local care councils is now created this statewide family council, so families can speak up and work together and be heard where it counts. I felt like that the family care councils have not had the statutory authority to really do what we want them to do. And we all know the families are the experts in this. And if they don't have a voice, decisions that are made are not going to be good. And so I think this is huge. I don't think this will get vetoed. It could get vetoed. And we've asked people to write letters supporting it to the governor. If you want to write a letter supporting it to the governor, send me an email at ceo@arcflorida.org, and send me anything about you, and I'll help you write a letter. It's that important. I'll take the time to do that because this is critical. This is the gold nugget in the legislature this year, this bill that's really going to help. And if it gets vetoed for some reason unrelated to substance, because there's no way anyone who cares about people with disabilities can veto this bill, I don't believe, that we will be fighting to get a override of the veto. So
hey, Alan,
yeah,
let me just one thing I want to point
Sure.
out about the bill that I think is important, because we're talking about some managed care provisions. There's one provision in there, and just to read everything about managed care here is the bill makes it real clear that it's all voluntary on the individual's part. There was an issue that was causing people, I think, some heartburn of where people were being auto-assigned. Now, this isn't the managed care pilot that deals with the IDD specific services, but just for their normal medical care, people were getting auto-enrolled into a managed care plan. And I think in some instances, it was probably without their knowledge and certainly without their consent. What this bill does, and this is a subtle piece in the bill, but it's really important, is it basically provides that nobody's going to get auto-enrolled in a managed care plan, whether it's the regular medical managed medical assistance, the MMA, or whether it's our managed care pilot for IDD, is going to prevent people from being auto-enrolled. So the only way you'll get enrolled is if you proactively indicate that you would like to enroll. You will always have that option. So I just thought that would be important to make
No,
sure people understand that's in there.
that is important. That's critical because it really confused people about where they were. A lot of people who don't want managed care that are in it couldn't figure out how to get out of it because no one would answer the phone. So that's a great for pointing that out. Before I go to the bills that didn't pass, I just want you to know that they were out there and they're going to probably return next year. John, did you want to add anything there before? We covered a bunch of bills. We appreciate your help in getting us in the rooms we need to be in throughout session. But anything you want to add on that from your perspective?
No, I think, the one thing I would add to bring it back to the common denominator of advocacy, going back to the King Card Johnson bill, we'll be keeping an eye. And I think, Alan, you'll talk a little bit about this since we're in an extended session, that therefore creates an abbreviated period in which when the bills are brought to the governor has less time to act than if the bills are presented outside of session. And so as we continue to work on, identifying when that bill will be delivered for the governor's action, I think continued engagement is going to be critical to make sure we get across the finish line. And in the scenario that if the governor were to veto it, we have an action plan to encourage a veto override. But we're getting a few steps ahead. And so again, I think the common denominator there is just the next few weeks are going to be pretty critical. So we'll remain engaged.
Well, since these bills pass, you bring up a good point. The Constitution, Article 3, Section 8, has executive approval and vetoes. And just want to touch about that because all these bills are subject to that now. What happens next? And if you read the Constitution, it talks about the whole thing's triggered by the bill being presented. I guess that's a word of art, Jim?
Yeah.
That presented to the governor.
Well,
what does that mean? They
both-
wrap it in a present?
Both presiding officers sign the bill and they literally deliver it to the governor. And once that happens, it starts the clock. And if it's during a session and they remain in session for the entire time, it's a 7-day period that he either has to veto it or it becomes law without his signature. If they were to end the session on day 7, then that 7-day window becomes a 15-day window. But under any scenario, the legislature could come back and override.
And I think to add to that too, Alan, Jim's absolutely right. That there's a little bit of gamesmanship that goes into the timing of when the officers sign the bill and present it to the governor. Sometimes it has to do with budget action, right? They'll slowly release bills, and there's really no method of the madness at times. But if there is a scenario where they're in session and we're in next week and that bill's presented, that does provide a little bit more of an abbreviated time frame for the governor to take action. So
Yep.
We'll be monitoring that and working to get some intel as to when that'll all come to fruition.
So the good news is, these bills that we care about were voted unanimously. Everyone supported them. I don't know any of these bills that got a no vote on the floor or house, which is great news that if there has to be an override. I think the governor will sign these bills because I think he cares about the people we're serving. There may be politics going on, but in the end, it's about people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. But the time they have to override the veto isn't just between sessions. It's till the end of the next session. That's why this past year, you saw them bring back some bills from the year before and override some vetoes to help people with disabilities, homeless, things like that, veterans. So that was good news. Let me mention the bills that didn't pass and give a little comment on each of them. These are major bills that are considered dead based on the end of session. They said, we're not going to do policy anymore. We're going to do budget. The funny thing is, it's hard to separate policy and budget because most policies are impacted by budget. And the legislature does that through some bills that Jim had talked about before. I forgot what they're called. conforming bills or things like that.
Conforming bills.
Yeah, conforming bills, but also there's proviso associated with language that comes out that kind of tells them how they have to spend the money. The first one is House Bill 1227 by Tremont, what we refer to as the Medicaid Unwind Bill, where they were kicking people off. There really was a lack of communication between DCF and APD, and people who had forever disabilities were being kicked off, which created a real problem for everyone. That bill did not pass, even though it was 100% of them voted on identical bills in the House and Senate. It just never got that last call in the Senate to vote for it. I don't know why. It was shocking to me, but I do think there has to be another plan because everyone understands. I remember Melissa standing up with a stack of paper that said, every one of these pieces of paper is an administrative hearing that's going to cost thousands of dollars because they took someone off Medicaid they shouldn't have. It is an expensive proposition to kick people off Medicaid when they're supposed to be on, because that means they have to fix it. And as it relates to providers, what that means is the provider never knows because we're not noticed. The waiver support coordinators, the families notice, but the provider isn't. So we keep providing services even though we're not getting paid. We find out 3 months later they're not on Medicaid, and the providers can't kick them out of the program because, you know, these are people that need the services or it's a disaster. So they keep providing it, and hopefully we go back and get the money. But it's very expensive to not fix this. And so I'm a believer that it's coming back during the budget part because it's so tied to the budget. But just want to shout out to Tremont, who was such a strong advocate on this. The next bill was House Bill 21, dental therapy by Cheney. This bill was never heard in the Senate, believe it or not. Yet it was a bill that created a category of people that provide services called dental therapists that only do the type of dental treatment that that they are trained on. And so, you know, with Agency with Persons with Disabilities and the people we serve, there's not enough dental services out there. We supported it at the ARC of Florida just because dental therapy might be able to get to the point where these non-major things like root canal could be taken care of even in the community with mobile units going to group homes and things like that. The interesting thing about this, although it didn't pass any committee in the Senate, out of the blue, the House tagged it on to an important bill for the Senate and sent it back over. And I think that's where I think this is what caused a lot of what was going to happen during the last few days of the substantive bills issues, because you know, there's kind of these rules. If you don't hear it in the substantive committee, they don't want to vote on it on the floor because it's never been vetted through those staff. So that became very complicated. You're not going to hear about it during the budget part, but it is going to be back next year as an issue. I think it's a priority of the speaker, and I'll personally be supporting it next year. But I think that's an interesting bill that helps marginalized populations that aren't getting services to expand the prevention piece and not the deep end dental work. The next one I know is important to a lot of you all. It was House Bill 257 by Chambliss, cameras in the classroom. It was never heard in the Senate. It's not going to be here during the budget, but it will be back next year. So for those of you that support that, it's going to be filed again next year. And I want you to look at this as not a loss, because the first session, it didn't get through, but the next session begins pretty quick. I mean, January is the formal session, but in a few months, October, we're going to start having committee meetings again. So it's coming back. So I want you to look at the big picture. President Albritton and Speaker Perez, this is like one whole thing. This was supported by Perez in the House. So it's coming back. And so advocacy is going to be important there. But it's not coming back this session. It's not going to be tied to anything. But cameras in the classroom, I know is important to a lot of you. The last one I want to mention, actually two more. Senate Bill 756, Burton, never heard in the House. I mean, yeah, never heard in the House, but passed in the Senate. It's the autism spectrum disorder to align with the latest DSM for purposes of insurance and stuff. And what this did was it removed the previous age and educational status condition. So I think they had a rule and statute that the diagnosis had to be before 8 for autism, for them to get services from the provider, the healthcare provider. The fact of the matter is, I think they're providing this services a lot anyway, because by not doing it, it's more expensive. If you're not getting ABA therapy because you were diagnosed after age 8, what does that really mean? It means you go to more expensive services like Baker Act or incarceration. So this, I think that there's a thought that this was expanding Medicaid in some way, but it actually is the federal law, and this is something we'll be advocating for next year. It needs to be fixed, and that'll be something to be continued to be worked on. The last one, House Bill 1439 by Gerwig, Hope, Florida. I don't know if I need to talk about that much. I think the newspapers and the legislature talked enough about that. Give Stephanie, go off mute. I'll let you say a comment about Hope, Florida.
Oh, I don't know. Well, Hope Florida has, I don't know where to lead with this, Alan. Hope Florida was looking to be codified into law, where right now, the Hope Florida initiative is part of the executive branch. And as Governor DeSantis is on his last term out of Florida, if it was codified into law, meaning like embedded into statute, then that program would go on beyond his term as governor. But through this session, we have discovered a lot of discrepancies with Hope Florida. It's all you got to do is throw in a Google search on Hope Florida if you don't know what I'm talking about. Personally, for me, Hope Florida has come into the Agency of Persons with Disabilities and really disappointed a lot of families who really need help waiting on our pre-enrollment list. So I am really grateful that the legislature has taken a deep dive into this. It's caused a lot of noise between the houses, but sometimes noise is necessary so that families get served. And the Hope Florida bill is dead, right?
Yeah, thanks, Stephanie. I appreciate you that little commentary from a family member, which is the right person that commentary should come from. And I don't think we'll see that bill again unless something dramatic happens, which I can't imagine. So that's kind of like the ones that didn't make it through the finish line, but they moved the finish line back. That we have another session coming up, so some of those bills that we like will come back. I do want to get into now. All the budget stuff is still out there. So what I'm going to do is say something that could possibly be in there and have Jim and John comment on it about the possibility. I know iConnect was in a bill, but it was also in some language. Jim, I know you work with therapy a lot, and this has been something that me and you have gone in and talked to people. And John, you've set up some meetings, including with leadership on this issue. So is there hope for iConnect? Because everyone wants to know, because we had the reprieve from recoupment of usage of it, and the immense time you have to do if you use iConnect. So Jim, you first, and John, if you have a comment on that. I know we spend a lot of time on it.
Yeah, well, I think we're in good shape in terms of getting iConnect addressed in a meaningful way. And honestly, this is one where my message to the House and Senate is that I like what both of them did. Just the House requires APD to stand up an interface. It allows providers to maintain data in their own data systems and to transmit that information electronically. And if they do that, they're able to skip some of the more the really onerous training requirements that come with using iConnect. The Senate approach is basically to have the same company that did the study of the iConnect system that documented all of the issues, to have them do requirements analysis, and that would set the stage to replace the iConnect system. That's also good policy, in my opinion. I don't know that the iConnect system is nearing its 10th birthday. Nowhere close to the original envision's functionality has been or will be made available. Most notably, a portal for family members or self-advocates to access information related to them. So I don't know that you really fix that system after this length of time, particularly given the outdated technology that it's based on. And no matter what the new system is, this ability to interface with providers that have already taken the initiative to implement EHR, electronic health record systems, in their own businesses, they should not be required to use the state software. So this is one where I think the best of both worlds is we get a little bit of both chambers. And that's where I'm hoping this winds up. And I'd love to hear Jonathan's thought as well.
Good. Yeah, John, I mean, you've been in the middle of this too, getting us in the rooms and stuff and having great discussions.
Yeah, again, Jim, as usual, that was an artful description of where the House and Senate are. I do believe, and while no decisions have been made yet, that there's a tendency to lean toward the Senate's position. I think you may see some sort of hybrid with, connectivity in interface. But I do believe that there's a trend toward moving, re-examining the stand-up of an alternative system. That's the indication I preliminarily have gotten out of the House. Again, where they land, I add the caveat that anything's possible. I think you may see some commingling there, but that's every indication I've gotten, is that they understand that it's far from being saved. I know this is certainly important to the speaker, and so I think that's where we're likely headed. Jim, is that a fair representation, or from what you're hearing?
Yes, based on what I'm hearing, and I think there would be. I think there's a lot of people I know, and not just other vendors, but I think from everyone that's been affected by that system, I think that's probably the preferred outcome.
Yeah,
I know when they created that new committee called the IT Policy and Budget Subcommittee in the House. In reality, they probably could have called it the iConnect Subcommittee, because in reality, I think this system is what triggered. We need to look at IT separately. It can't be mixed in with stuff. And you got to give it to Speaker Perez, that realizing that this is a statewide thing with all systems. We know that the second they purchase a system and freeze it there and build it after a couple of years, outsiders have already exceeded it because technology moves so fast. And I think this is a real recognition of that, when the testimony was that it can't be fixed. Basically, that's the testimony I heard. So the next thing I want to talk about, we talked about it a minute ago.
We've got just about 5 minutes left.
Okay, I'm going to go through these quick. Kai, you get to talk. We're going to open it up to you. You're going to be the first question when we get through these last things. But quickly, the Medicaid unwind, how can that get in the bill? Because it has to. It has to get in, because it was a disaster. I remember Melissa, waiver support, probably the top waiver support coordinator group in the state. They hired 2 positions just to deal with Medicaid unwind, and it caused them not to be able to bring people off the waiver because they didn't have the muscle. So how can that eventually get in if we get lucky, the Medicaid unwind?
Yeah, Al, I'm happy to jump in here. I know you and I talked before this phone call. I had some conversations with the Senate as recently as this morning. So I think everybody's aware here that the standalone bills became collateral damage there at the end. The language was one heartbeat away from getting passed and should have passed. So my question was that very question. What's the plan for the budget? And so I think you'll see some language likely come forward in a conforming bill. And as Jim pointed out, you've got implementing, which is one time or 1 year, consistent with the budget year. But conforming, which conforms to the budget, is in perpetuity. That is law. So I think what we'll likely see is some conforming language coming forward to provide for Medicaid unwind as part of an offer during budget conference, in which I expect, and I'll confirm based on some conversations with the House, that they'll accept. That's my understanding as of this morning. Again, subject to change, of course, I always add that caveat, but I think we'll see something in the budget, which frankly, I think is probably best suited as part of a budget item.
That's good. The other thing is in the Senate side, they have a 50 million one-time expansion for providers. It's not on the House side. My concern is given the language with it, I don't know if they can get it done because they have to go through an LBC. They have to figure out how to get out there. And I'm wondering if it will even, it's challenging. So that's there. Just want you to know about that. Of course, we want it, but the execution is what concerns me once they put it in there. The next piece is a 5% rate increase. It's not in the House and Senate. If we get it, it's like, it's like I'll say it's a miracle if we get it, but we are fighting for it because, we know that the last survey we did of providers was before the minimum wage went up $1. I think we did it in August. Minimum wage went up in September, another $1. We did a survey. That survey that was before the increase, but we also know in September it's going up another $1. And even though we got 11% a year and a half ago, that our people are still running deficits, our providers, and now they got to make up for $2. And Dina sent out a survey to providers, quick 72-hour turnaround, a couple questions. And I just want to make a couple notes of this and why the rate increase is important. When we did it in August, 85% of providers said last year, even with the increase, that 95% of the providers stated they are operating at a loss. The survey we just did, 85% was last year. So we know things are getting worse. Because what happens is when you get that $1 added and there's been no increase in rate, it takes a while for people to realize there's jobs where they can make more money. So it's not like it happens instantaneously. Every month, people start realizing more and more, and we start losing staff. So in 2024, it was 85%. Now it's 95% that better make up for that money by raising money or something else. 42% of providers last year said reducing client services, that they were reducing client services because of their ability. Now it's up to 60% in the survey done this week that will reduce services for client in the upcoming year if there isn't an additional rate. And on an average last year, there were 11% base positions vacant, and now there's 14%. So we know as time goes on, it gets worse. And let me tell you, it's worse for rural areas. So if you care about rural areas, it's very important. And I'll tell you why. A few years ago, when President Simpson said everyone gets $15, every direct support professional gets $15 an hour. And Dina, we're going to go a little longer if we have to, because I think this is important. Especially, I want to hear Kaya be able to say her comment and answer any questions. For those that have to leave, that's fine. We're taping it. It's going to be on YouTube. But in rural areas, when they did the $15 an hour, we were all happy. We all supported it. But the market really didn't support in rural areas $15 an hour. They may have been paying $9. So every penny they got went to pay staff to get them up to 15, even though the market may not have actually needed it. But in the urban areas where they may have been paying close to 15, they were able to support those individuals in other ways through whatever, transportation or whatever they needed to do to be able to support those staff. So now we get into a situation where the House had to basically raise, the rural area had to raise money because they had already, they used all the money to raise staff salaries. But, they still need to provide other supports for people that are supporting people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, because they didn't give rate increases to supervisors, managers, or everyone else. And you can't have a line staff making more than a supervisor. So it really became complicated. So, we're hoping we can get this 5% rate increase. I'm spending all my time trying to do that because I don't want to see us collapse next year. And I know that when we got the $15 an hour and Aaron Abin announced that when he was chairing that committee, I was never worried about it because I knew, and Aaron Bean knew, and everyone else knew, if they didn't give us that huge rate increase, the whole system was collapsing. I knew they wouldn't let that happen. And that's why Pasadomo stepped in a year and a half ago, and why we need leadership right now in the House and Senate to basically, it sounds great, let's get people off the wait list. We all support that, but it really doesn't help if you get off the wait list and you're in another wait line. Because if there's not services out there, it really doesn't do a lot of good for the people we're trying to serve. The other thing is wait list. What's going on with the wait list, Jim, real quick? I know there was some splitting of half the money to managed care, half to the iBudget, and it looks like there was going to be a competition between iBudget and managed care with regard to the pilot.
Yep.
Where are we with that?
All right, the House has a wait list, 31.2 million for iBudget, 31.2 million for the managed care pilot to expand. So yes, you're right, equal amount going into both programs. The Senate does not address the wait list at all. In fact, other than to adopt proviso language that would allow the agency to use existing budgeted dollars to enroll people in crisis, which actually reverts back to the practice that was in place whenever I was the director. There is sufficient attrition, in other words, people coming off of the waiver, and that frees up more than enough money to enroll people in crisis. And that's how the Senate is addressing that. It'll be an issue, I'm sure, that's going to be talked about and subject to some kind of compromise between the House and the Senate. If they don't address it at all, it'd be the first time in several years. So
Jim, we both know they're going to address it. I wouldn't even be surprised if there was a huge infusion of money on that. We know that leadership keeps money to themselves in their pots. We know this is a priority of the speaker, and we know that President Albritton is very supportive. That if let's put it this way, if the House offers to help people, I can't imagine Ben Albritton turning that down, because he cares more about people that are vulnerable than anyone I know. So I think we're in good shape there. I was going to talk a little about federally what's going on, because that's important, but I'm not going to, because we don't have time. There's going to have to be another meeting at some point to talk about what happened with budget, but also what happened federally. There's a couple questions in here before we get to Kaya. I just want to go through them real quick. Dina, you see any questions that we have the ability to answer? How can they cut the money in a budget if you never use services? That's a good question. We saw that with dental, that they're removing money because APD hasn't contracted out or used it. There was $11.5 million. And because no one used it, you can't fault the legislature because they want to use the money for something else. But that is going to be a continued problem with dental, and we understand that, and we'll talk about that at the next meeting. But one side wants to remove, I think, 6 million, the other 3 million. They're not getting rid of it all because they know there's a problem, but the money is not being spent, even though dental services are needed so desperately. Let's see. Also, I want to point out, during testimony, they said they had 315. We don't use the word surplus anymore. Melissa yelled at me. She goes, "It's not surplus, it's money that was not spent." And I took that to heart. I'm never using the word surplus. if there's service needs out there and they're just not spending it. But they kept saying it was 350 million or something like that. But what they don't say is if they would have spent it, there'd be a match. So we're talking 850 million, and we're getting close to $1 billion, Jim. I mean, that's pretty incredible with the match, the services they could provide. Even if they didn't want to provide it with the match, they have GR. You know, we have people being told they ran out of GR to help families on the wait list and they have all this money there. So I think that's a continued issue. What other questions are out here? Someone really likes the family care council part. I agree with you 100%. That's huge. I took a call. Let's see. Good. People are advocating, writing letters to support Kincard's bill on it was the APD bill, but I think we'll still call it the APD bill. The transition from managed care to iBudget be immediate, or will the individual have a waiting period? That's something that we don't know, but I anticipate it would be pretty quick. If they're in managed care and they want to switch back, Jim, that's not more of a how they do it thing. That's not a legislative thing. But they do say that you can be able to switch back.
Yep, that's my understanding as well.
If people want to email the governor, if anyone wants to do something, email me. I'll get your answers. If you want to know the name of a rep or how to write the governor, how to email the governor, I will help you. Just email me. My email is ceo@arcflorida.org. Let's see. Okay, good. Dina, now. Okay, John, thank you for your time, man. I know you'd rather be over there in Perez's office demanding something for us at this moment, but you took a step away. If we don't get something we want, we're going to blame it on me because I had you here instead of there. And Jim DeBogerin, we got to come up with a name for you because you are the master class at this stuff. And you know, if they have a Hall of Fame, you're probably going to be the first person in it for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So maybe we'll work on that, is create this Hall of Fame, recognize a lot of you guys that are just doing great work. Keep up the advocacy. Love you guys. It makes it all worth it when we have such a great team speaking with one voice. So thank you. We'll check out now.
Thanks, Alan.
Take care, guys.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.